All right, welcome in everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to explore.
Today, we're heading to a region that's probably not on everyone's travel list, but historically, super significant. Seb'aa Enderta. It's tucked away in northern Ethiopia.
Fascinating area.
Yeah, and we've been going through the Enderta Chronicles podcast. And honestly, what we want to figure out is how the landscape itself, the mountains and valleys, even its location, how that's all shaped, well, everything. The history, the trade, even how people live their lives there.
And it's a powerful example, really, of how much geography matters. It's not just about maps. It's about how the land shapes human stories.
Exactly. So Seb'aa Enderta, northern Ethiopia, right? Part of the Tigray Highlands.
Right. Think of it as almost like a bridge, geographically, between the higher central highlands and the lowlands further out.
Okay, and the terrain. This isn't just rolling hills, right?
No. We're talking serious mountains, rugged, with those dramatic, steep escarpments, like huge cliffs, basically. But then you also have these fertile valleys kind of nestled in between.
So that placement, that in-between spot, that had to have been a major factor in how things developed there.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the Chronicles really emphasizes this, that central location made Seb'aa Enderta a crossroads, a natural meeting point.
A hub, yeah.
Exactly. And not just for people passing through, but for trade, military movements, even cultural exchange. Imagine like a funnel, everything flowing through this one region.
So geographically, kind of the star of the show is this huge highland plateau, right? And then the Giba River cutting these deep valleys through it.
And the podcast highlights that, yeah. The Giba, it was this crucial water source.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, essential, right? But also a natural barrier.
Makes sense. Those valleys wouldn't have been easy to cross.
Especially with a large group or an army. So natural defense, right? Yeah. But also where you could settle depended on that river. It's like this push and pull.
And then there's the escarpment, right? That sharp drop off where the highlands meet the lowlands.
Right. And that affects, well, everything. The rainfall, even the types of plants and animals you find there, it's like nature drawing a line in the sand, literally.
A line with consequences.
Big time. You get these very distinct ecological zones, basically because of the altitude and the slope, that changes how much rain an area gets.
Microclimates, right? A podcast mentioned that.
Yeah, and what's cool is that variation actually supported a lot of different types of agriculture, which meant a more reliable food supply and more to trade.
So already we see how geography is dictating what's possible, what people could even do there.
Exactly, and it's not just about the location. The podcast also talks about the soil, which is super fertile thanks to, get this, volcanic deposits from way back.
So good for growing crops, right?
Perfect for it. Teff, barley, wheat, all staples. So if you're thinking about why people would settle there, that fertile ground is a big draw.
Makes sense. If you can reliably grow food, you can build a community.
Right. And going back to those microclimates, they almost act like different agricultural zones all within this one region. That's huge for having a variety of crops. In case one fails, you've got others.
Smart. But it wasn't all perfect, was it? The podcast also mentioned water scarcity, that having to rely on the rivers also made things tough sometimes.
Yeah, that's the flip side. Water's essential, but in a lot of this region, it's scarce. So that influenced where people could even live, what they could do.
Had to plan around it.
For sure, and the podcast probably gets into their traditional systems for irrigation and water harvesting. It's amazing how people adapt,
So with all this in mind, how did the first settlements start popping up? The podcast says, logically, people were drawn to the higher ground, building fortified settlements.
Right. Makes sense. You use the landscape to your advantage. Those elevated settlements, you've got the visibility, you can see threats coming, you can monitor the trade routes.
Strategic.
And then there's the terraced farming, which is just incredible. People literally carving out farmland on these steep slopes.
Really shows how they worked with the land, not against it.
Absolutely. And then there's Hentlolo, this ancient city, a major center for administration and the military. And guess what? Elevated location.
Spotting a trend here.
Right. It wasn't by chance. It was a deliberate choice. You've got the natural defenses. You're close to the trade routes. It's perfect for controlling the surrounding area. The Chronicles probably goes deep on how being in that spot gave them such an advantage.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the podcast connects that to Mikkel, which becomes important later. Same idea, same geographical advantages.
Geography's a long game.
Okay, let's talk trade routes. Seb'aa Enderta was a link, right? connecting the highlands of the Agazian region with the Red Sea ports.
Vital link, yeah. The Chronicles really drives that point home. They had these highland passages that were crucial for getting goods from the interior out to the coast. And it was a huge operation. Think camel caravans, pack mules, all traversing that rugged terrain.
I'm picturing it now, this ancient superhighway, but with camels.
And not just any goods. We're talking gold, ivory, frankincense, myrrh, the good stuff.
That's serious wealth, and it brought in outside influences, right? The cultural exchange the podcast talks about.
Oh, definitely. Trade, it's like this two-way street, not just goods, but ideas, beliefs, technology, all flowing in and out.
Yeah, the Chronicles mentions specific influences, right? For places like the Arabian Peninsula and Egypt.
Yeah, merchants and travelers bringing all these new things. So you end up with this fascinating blend of local and foreign in Seb'aa Enderta's culture.
And here's where it gets really interesting historically. The podcast brings up the Aksumite Empire and how they controlled these trade routes, basically using Ender's passages to move goods between their capital, Aksum, and their trading partners on the Red Sea.
So now we see Seb'aa Enderta playing a key role in a major empire's economic strategy.
It makes you realize how those seemingly unchangeable geographical features are shaping huge historical events.
For the Aksumites, controlling those passages was everything. That's their lifeline, the flow of goods, their power in the region. The Chronicles probably even gets into like what they did to secure those routes, fortifications, maybe even specific policies.
And then there's the story of Queen Yodit, how she might have used these routes to extend her influence, as this whole other layer to it.
Shows you how these routes weren't just about economics, but also about power, military strategy. If you controlled them, you controlled a lot more than just goods.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about Seb'aa Enderta as a military stronghold. The podcast uses that phrase, formidable stronghold, and it makes sense when you think about those mountain barriers.
Oh yeah, trying to invade that area. Good luck. It's like a natural fortress. Those mountain passes, they're natural choke points, perfect for defense.
So small forces could hold off much larger ones.
Absolutely. And then you have the terrain itself. Very difficult to move an army through those mountains. Supply lines become a nightmare, ambushes are easy. The Chronicles probably mentions how the valleys and plains became these key battlegrounds because they were the few open spaces.
And whoever controlled those mounting passes, they weren't just defending themselves, they were controlling access to the entire Agazian region.
Yup, they're like the gatekeepers, deciding who comes in and who doesn't. This is classic pre-modern military strategy. Control the choke points, control the region, and Seb'aa Enderta's geography makes that very, very possible.
The podcast gives a great example of this, Emperor Johannes V in the 19th century. He was actually from the area, and he used that mountain terrain to fight off both the Egyptians and the Mahdist forces.
It's a perfect example of someone understanding their land and using it as a weapon. The Chronicles probably has some amazing details about specific battles, how the terrain played a role, how Johannes V outsmarted his enemies. It shows the enduring value of those natural defenses.
So even centuries later, geography is still the deciding factor in these huge conflicts.
Absolutely. Okay, last thing. The podcast talks about how this geography, these mountains and valleys, how they're still shaping culture and identity in Seb'aa Enderta today.
It's not just ancient history, it's still relevant.
Totally. You know, we tend to think of geography as static, but it really isn't. The people of Seb'aa Enderta, they have this deep connection to the land. It's shaped their resilience, how they farm, how they manage water, even how they build infrastructure.
It's like the land is part of their story, not just the setting for it.
Exactly. And the Chronicles probably touches on this too, how that connection shows up in their stories, their folklore. Think about those war stories, the legends about the mountains and rivers. It's all tied in.
It's like the geography is almost a character in their history.
It is. It's both a protector and a provider, a source of life, and also a place where they've had to fight for survival. That's powerful.
So to wrap it up, the big takeaway here is that the geography of Seb'aa Enderta, it's not just a backdrop. It's been this active force shaping everything, from trade and economics to military strategy and even culture. To really understand this region, you have to understand its landscape.
And the Enderta Chronicles does a great job of highlighting that, how everything comes back to geography. It wasn't just random chance that made Seb'aa Enderta important, it was the land itself.
So for our listeners, think about this. We often underestimate how much the seemingly permanent features of our world, the landscapes around us, how they affect us, how they shape our history, our lives even.
It's a good point. Take a step back and look at your own environment, your own geography, both literally the land you live on, and maybe even figuratively, the structures and systems around you. How have those shaped your opportunities, your story? It's something to think about.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us today, and until next time, keep exploring.